All right. So we're going to get started, and today is the second part of the semantics lecture, the long 3-week semantics lecture. So we're going to get started with this, and this is very much an exercise so that you get a worked out example, and then you can do the exercise that was posted, I think, yesterday in the class. Okay? Yeah, the pasta one. Right. So here we have what is it? 6 items, 6 objects, right? We need to do a feature analysis of these objects. Helpfully, I've put pictures of each object underneath, so we're clear about what is what. Especially if you're not a native speaker, this may be somewhat confusing. All right. So and you're going to do the exercise. I'm just going to write down the thing. So how would you differentiate a chair from a stool? What feature would differentiate a chair from a stool? Back. All right, so we're going to have back. And so a chair is going to be what? Plus back. And a stool is going to be minus back. Right? Okay, so that's good because that gives us a difference between a chair and a stool. All right.
So we always start with like a first pair?
What do you mean?
You just started with chair and stool.
Right.
Do we, like, when we do feature analysis, do we always start like with the first pair, or can I already see that the ottoman and the bench don't have a back and just go ahead and do it too?
Well, logically, you have to start with 1, right? You cannot start with 2. Because you have to do 1. Then you can move on to the second one, right? I mean, you have to do it one step at a time, right? So the first step is you say, I need a feature that distinguishes two words, right? Now, once you've come up with your feature, then you have to apply it all the way down, okay? Because it has to be done for every thing. So an armchair is going to be plus or minus back, plus. The couch is also plus back, obviously. Ottoman?
Minus.
Minus, very good. And then the bench? Minus. All right, very good. So now we have basically 3 and 3. So actually, that's a good deal. That's good, because when you're looking for features, you want to split your semantic field that you're analyzing in 2. That's the way that you're going to minimize the number of features. Because remember, that's the goal, is to do it with the least number of features that you can, okay? Because, I mean, often you get this when students are doing this for the first time, they come up with 15 features. Well, that's pointless. That's useless, right? The trick is to do it with the least number of features, okay? All right, so then what's our next feature that we're going to put here? So now we have chair and armchair that are the same. They're plus back, both of them. So how can we distinguish between a chair and an armchair? Arms, very good. And you kind of can tell from the title, from the name of the thing, right? So a chair has no arms, a stool, no arms, an armchair plus, the couch is also plus, the ottoman is going to be minus, and so is the bench, right? All right, very good. Okay, so now we need to distinguish between the armchair and the couch, right? Because they're obviously plus, 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 right? So they're not distinguished by our analysis.
One place.
Like size?
Yeah, okay, so seats 1, okay. All right, so a chair clearly seats 1. A stool, same thing. An armchair, yes. A couch, minus, right? It seats more than 1. A bench also clearly seats more than 1, right? Okay, now the ottoman is a bit of a tricky one because, well, does it seat more than 1 person?
Depends on the size, right?
It depends on the size. So let's look at the example that you have there. Is that something that 2 people can sit on? Maybe, right? Now, in cases like this, sometimes you're going to do something like plus or minus, meaning it depends, we don't know. Sometimes people just put a question mark saying we don't know. Or you take the plunge and you say, I'm going to say, yes, Ottomans seat more than one. And by the way, that would be the differentiation between an Ottoman and a poof. There's a poof seats one, but an Ottoman is bigger, right? But so we're going to put plus minus here. It doesn't really matter. All right. Okay. So now we could be done. Okay, because we have three features, and three features can differentiate how many words?
6.
Nope. Theoretically, in an ideal world.
9.
8.
Oh, yeah, because.
2 to the power of 3. Okay, remember that's how it works. Okay, now, what am I doing? I'm asking a class of English majors, right? Yeah, right. Okay, so have we differentiated among all 6 words? How do we know? Okay, you look across and you say, okay, a chair is plus back minus arms plus seats 1. The stool is clearly different because it doesn't have a back. The armchair is clearly different because it's all pluses all across. The couch is plus plus minus. The bench is minus minus minus. And the ottoman is minus minus plus or minus, right? So it looks like we're okay because we've differentiated everything. The only one that's tricky now is the ottoman, okay? So what if we said we're going to say that the ottoman seats more than one, okay? So now stool and ottoman, wrong, my bad. So it's a minus, right? It seats more than one, okay? So now we have to distinguish between the ottoman and the bench. Pardon me?
It's cushioned.
Cushioned, okay, so stuffed. All right. Now notice that we have to fill in everything here. So the chair is not stuffed, the stool is not stuffed, the armchair is stuffed, the couch is stuffed, the ottoman is stuffed, and the bench isn't. Okay? And now we have succeeded. Definitely everything is different. Okay? Again, you're looking across, right? So, for example, here, you're looking at this row. Okay. You're looking at this row here, and you're looking this way to see whether it matches any row underneath, okay? If they're all different, then you can stop, okay? That's when you know that you've finished the exercise, okay? If there are any 2 rows that are the same, like before when we didn't have stuffed, right? Ottoman and bench were the same, all minuses, right? So then that tells you you're not done, okay? So that's how you do, and in this case, then we've done 6 words with 4 features. That's good. 3 would be better, right? But 4 is good. Why? Because 4 is smaller than 6. Okay? So if we'd done it 6 words with 6 features, it would be very bad. Okay? With 5 features, it's, okay, but not fantastic. Okay? The idea is that you should try to do it with the least number of features necessary. So 3 was the least number of features necessary. Okay? Because it was 2, 4, 8, right? The number of words that you can distinguish with the features. Okay? 2 features will distinguish, 1 feature will distinguish 2 words, 2 feature will distinguish 4, 3 will distinguish 8. Okay? That's how you do this. All right, any questions? All right, so I'm going to save this, and then Shihun, you will send it to, you will post it on the website. All right, so now we're going to go back to our lecture, right? So we stopped after feature analysis. So today we're going to do sense relations and formal semantics. So first of all, what do we mean when we say sense relations? Well, what we mean is really relationships among words in the lexicon, okay? And when we say lexicon, what we need is the dictionary. What we mean is the dictionary, okay? The lexicon are all the words of the language. The dictionary is an approximation of the lexicon, right? I mean, obviously, because it is written by humans, for humans, it can never collect all the words of a language. There's always slang and new expressions that are invented and technical terms and all of that are not going to be part of the, are not going to be into any dictionary, but are part of the language anyway, okay? Proof is that they do, every year they have a new word, a list of new words that have been added to the dictionary, and so on. So meaning relationships among words in the lexicon. And so the first one is metaphors, okay? And metaphors you should all be familiar with, at least from high school. It's when you use a word in a figurative sense, okay? So the example that I chose there is the quiz was a bear, okay? Now, in this case, it's not that I brought to class an actual bear, and that was the quiz. So you had to survive the bear, and if you did, you passed the class. Okay, that's not it. So what does it mean that the quiz was a bear?
Hard.
It was hard, it was difficult, it was unpleasant, right? So in other words, it was a negative experience. Why? Because bears are not particularly pleasant to be with, okay? They're scary, they're big, they eat you, that kind of thing. Metonymy. Now, metonymy is interesting because people often misunderstand it. It's essentially like a metaphor, but it's sort of like a shy metaphor. It's a metaphor that doesn't go all the way. Okay, so it's a shift in meaning, but it doesn't go very far. Okay, so there's an example, lend me your ears. Now, do I mean literally cut an ear off your head and give it to me? No. So what do I mean when I say lend me your ears?
Tell me what you hear.
I'm sorry?
Tell me what you hear.
Well, listen to me. Okay, to lend somebody, somebody their ears is to pay attention, right? Listen. If I say, to get into this club, it's $10 a head, does that mean that they serve decapitated people? No, right? What it means is that I'm using a part for the whole thing, okay? So instead of saying a person, I'm saying, well, if there is a head, there's usually a person attached to it. Okay? If I say, I need to move a couch, can you give me a hand? I don't mean that you hand me a body part. Okay? That's a different meaning, right? So again, these are metonymies, are shifts in meaning, changes in meaning. Another example is, I say, I'm going to drink a glass of water. Is it the glass that you're drinking? No, it's the water, right? But so it's the container for the contained. Okay, so that's another metonymy. Synonymy, again, you should be familiar with this. It's words that have the same meaning. Now, when we say same, we mean it sort of to a certain extent, because people have argued there are no exact synonyms, because even words like freedom and liberty, which have the same meaning, but their collocations, the places where they occur, are different. Okay, so you cannot say give me freedom or give me liberty or give me death, but you can say give me freedom, right? Why? Well, because that's kind of an idiomatic expression, right? And so you can't really replace the two things. Antonymy is the opposite of synonymy. It words with opposite meaning. Love, hate. Okay. Now, there's many more meaning relationships. Even though usually people just consider these, but there's plenty more. So much so that some scholars, and I am particular to the theory of Melchuk, who is a Russian linguist that moved to Canada in the 1980s, he identified 46 meaning relationships in the lexicon. Okay, and so so there's a lot of relationships within the lexicon. It's not just synonymy, antonymy, and a few other things like that. Okay, or if you're in computer science, hyponymy and hyperonymy, or the IESA relationship. There's more than that. Okay, here's some examples of lexical functions, which are these relationships between the words. So you have sent. Oh, by the way, the names that Melchuk uses are in Latin, but that's just because he can. There's no particular reason for that. So that's the root for center. Okay, so the center of a forest is the thick of a forest, right? It's a collocation. You say the thick of the woods, right? You say the height of a crisis, or the boiling point of the crisis, right? So that would be, for the word crisis, the thing that indicates the culmination of, right? The summit of glory, the prime of my life. Okay, so you don't say this is the highest point of my life, right? That doesn't sound quite right. You say, I am in the prime of my life. I'm not. I'm long past the prime of my life, but you get my point. Okay. By the way, this is one of the ways that you identify non-native speakers. Okay, because the non-native speakers will get these wrong. Okay, because these are really difficult. Okay, because even some native speakers will not use them, they will only use them passively. They will have a passive understanding, but they won't use them actively. Okay, for example, the thick of the forest, I'm betting most native speakers aren't going to use that. Okay, because it's very sophisticated usage. Another example is to perform an action, right? And he calls it oper, from opus, right? So with the word blow, you don't say, he gave me a blow. You deal a blow. Okay? You lend support. You don't give support. Okay? So then you have the person, the other side of the action. You receive a blow and you receive support, right? So that's the same action, but from the other viewpoint. Okay? So this is the kind of thing that Melchuk identifies. And again, these are across the lexicon. Okay, these are just random examples that I pick. So the point here that's important is that these connections are across the lexicon. They're everywhere. Okay, all the words are connected through these relationships. Okay, and we'll say more about this in a minute. Okay, now the other thing, and now we're changing the subject. The other thing that's really important within the lexical domain is that, if you recall from last week's lecture, words have a meaning, right, that we've agreed upon as a culture, as a society, right? So when I say dog, you all think of the same animal that has, the characteristics of a dog. Okay? But then there is, so to speak, extra meaning. Okay? And this extra meaning is called the connotation of the word. The denotation is the regular meaning that everybody agrees on. Okay? The connotation goes beyond that meaning. Now, people may still all agree on it, okay? But it's meaning that goes beyond just the description of what the item is. Often, it passes a judgment on the object, okay? So there's a perfect example. Look at the word bachelor, okay? A bachelor is an unmarried adult male, right? A spinster is an unmarried adult female, right? Now, okay, I'm married, so it doesn't work. Let's say Bob here is a bachelor. He's not married, and I say Bob is a bachelor. Bob says, "All right, yeah, that's true." But then I turn and I say, Mary is a spinster. She's not married. She's a woman. She's an adult. Most likely, Mary's going to hit me with a 2x4, right? Why would Mary hit me on the head with a 2x4? Because there is the connotations, the extra meaning of the word, which is what?
It's like it's a negative connotation because it's
right.
Saying that you're not able to get married.
You're not able to get married. That's why you have bachelor party, but you don't have spinsters parties. You have bachelorette parties, okay? Because when they needed a good word for unmarried women, they couldn't use spinster because it was already taken with the meaning of she cannot get married. Okay? So then they had to say, oh, bachelorette, which means absolutely nothing. I mean, it's an absurd word because we have the word for unmarried female. It's spinster. Problem is that the connotation of the word is so strong that it prevented the use. I mean, what's a spinster's party look like? Think about it for a second. Think about it. In fact, homework for next time. Send me a description of a spinster's party. If you're in creative writing, it can be like a short story, The Spinster's Party. No, I'm joking. Don't do that. A cartoon would work as well. I don't know. I have no idea. But I mean, you see what I'm saying, right? The connotation is so strong that you're laughing when I say, what would a spinster's party look like, right? Because you're imagining a bunch of unmarried women who are probably very unhappy, and then God knows what they're doing, okay? Right, and it's a complete stereotype, okay? Because in all likelihood, a bunch of unmarried women would be, having a blast, drinking vodka and celebrating. And if it's in New York, they're, okay, forget that. Apparently, I've seen one too many episodes of Sex and the City, clearly. Now, interestingly enough, all words have connotations, okay? That is, don't fall for the trick to say, oh, bachelor doesn't have a connotation and spinster does, okay? Let's use a different example. What's the difference between a dog and a puppy? Assume that the dog is young. Well, assume that they're the same age.
The puppy's cute.
The puppy is cute, okay? When you're talking about a puppy, it's either you or your audience is a child. Puppy is the children word for dog, okay? So you can say, oh, what a big puppy you have, right? But you're pretending to be a child, okay? Or you're talking to a child, okay? So, you know, when you have your like Doberman, you say, don't touch the puppy, right? But it's a kid, okay? You know, so it's not that dog has no connotation and puppy has the connotation of being young. Dog has the connotation of being adult dog, right? Or dog when talking to adults. And puppy is dog when talking to non-adults, right? Both words have a connotation, okay? Except that normally we are not thinking about the connotation, okay? So where does the connotation come from? Okay, well, actually from all sorts of places, and that's an interesting thing. So these are different kinds of connotation that I've collected there. So one is basically just a value judgment of the speaker, okay? So here you have the opposition between a resistance fighter and a terrorist. What's the difference between a fighter for the resistance and the terrorist? That the terrorist doesn't agree with you and the resistance fighter agrees with you. That's it. They both do the same thing. They blow up bridges, they kill people, and so on. But in the case of the resistance, you are in favor, and in case of the terrorist, you're against. Okay, that's it. You know, they do the same thing. Okay. Collocations. You will remember collocations basically when words occur together. So you have things like cease and desist. What's the difference between cease and desist? Actually, they mean exactly the same thing, stop, right? But they occur together in legal language, okay? So if I say, you know, I've ceased attending class, no problem. But if I say, please cease and desist from attending class, you know that a lawyer wrote this. Okay, so it means legal. Okay.
Desist is in the legal.
Yes, cease and desist. It's the collocation.
Oh, the collocation.
Both of them together. Social collocation. Okay, so if I say, could you please open the door, as opposed to open the door, right? One is polite, the other one is not polite, right? So that is the kind of social marker that that is conveyed by these choices, right? If you address somebody as sir or madam, right, then you're being polite and you're indicating that they are your superior. In Spanish and in French and in Italian, the TV pronouns, right? If you address somebody with the T pronoun, you're conveying familiarity, friendliness. If you address somebody with the V pronoun, you're conveying respect, but also distance, right? Same thing if you address your child by their first name or by their full name. Okay, so my daughter, whenever it was Gaia Cristina Tardo, she was like, oh boy, I'm in trouble. Big trouble. Okay? Now, that's my favorite one, and not just for the reasons that you're thinking, because the word itself is perfectly innocent. Okay? So a cock is a male chicken, a rooster, you may want to say. But of course, it has another meaning, which is different entirely, referring to the male genitalia. Okay? But so if you say, I have 7 chickens and a cock, you get in trouble because people are thinking of the other thing. The fact that they're dirty-minded and you are completely innocent is irrelevant because the connotation is so strong that you can't use the word, and people have stopped using it in this sense. Okay, the same thing goes for the abbreviation of Richard as Dick, which is also a word for the male genitalia. There's lots of words for male genitalia, by the way, in languages across the world. Fascinatingly enough. Then you have individual connotations or restricted connotations. Right? These are things where the meaning evokes something, but just for you or just for your family. Okay, and I can give you an example of this, and this is an Antardo family story. Actually, it's on my mother's side, so I should say it's a Spinois family story, but regardless. So years and years ago, my uncle is getting married, and he was getting married to a young woman who came from a family that wasn't quite as well bred and educated as my grandfather's family. So at the reception, the father of the bride goes to the restroom, comes out, and he's forgotten to zip up his fly. So the mother of the bride shouts across the room, "Hey, Felix, you forgot to zip up your fly." Okay, shouts, right? So needless to say, everybody is like shocked by this thing. From that moment on, in my family, if anybody forgot to zip up their fly, people would say, "Felix," and you would know immediately what it was. Okay, there was no need to go into any more detail. So the word Felix had acquired, the name Felix had acquired the extra meaning of your fly is undone. And, so you need to zip up, right? That's a family restricted meaning. Outside of my family, no one would have understood what you were talking about, okay? And it can even be personal, okay? That's why, for example, lots of really bad poetry gets written, okay? Because, if your first girlfriend's name was, okay, somebody give me a name. Well, Mary is not, no, like an interesting name.
Elizabeth. Serena.
Elizabeth. Let's go with Elizabeth. So let's say that your first girlfriend was Elizabeth, or your first boyfriend was Theodore, right? I mean, you were little in high school, you didn't know any better, right? So whenever you say Elizabeth, you think of those youthful days when, you were rosy-cheeked and fresh, and, your first kiss with Elizabeth, or with Theodore, right? So it really makes you happy, right? It's a good thing. So you write a poem and it's Elizabeth. I remember those days when we first kissed, right? To you, it's lovely. But to everybody else, it's like Elizabeth was the cleaning lady that we fired after she was found that she was spitting in the soup every other day, right? To you, Elizabeth isn't fun at all, right? And that's why the poetry doesn't quite work, okay? Because it only works for the person who has those connotations, okay? If you were bitten by a dog when you were a child, and whenever somebody says dog, you think, oh, well, then that's your personal connotation, okay? That's why when people say cattle prod, I wince. That was a sophisticated joke. All right. Now, recently, people have started talking about connotation, but sort of rediscovered it from a different perspective, from within corpus linguistics. And so now they're talking about semantic prosody. And so, for example, if you look at words like pedal, be bent on something, commit something. He committed murder. He committed, fraud. He committed, I'm sorry, suicide. He committed adultery. Can you commit
Mistake.
I'm sorry?
A hug.
A hug, right. Can you commit a hug? No, it doesn't work, right? Can you commit an act of kindness? No, right? It doesn't work. To commit something, the something must be bad, right? That's how the connotation works, right? Break out. he broke out of jail, he broke out of prison, he broke out something, right? But you cannot say, well, if you say he broke out of the marriage, then he was unhappy in the marriage, right? Or she was unhappy in the marriage, right? That is, so you see the connotation is it was a bad thing. If you say, I broke out of the Caribbean resort, right? It makes no sense, right? Because we're all like, woohoo, let's go to the Caribbean resort because it's raining and it's cold. And we're like, hey, Caribbean resort, that sounds really good, right? So he broke out of the Caribbean resort. You're like, yeah, was he insane? You know, what's wrong with him, right? You know, he was being held in the Caribbean resort against his will. Yeah, no. Yeah. So clearly, then, to break out of something, you have to have a negative connotation to the something, right? So that's what a corpus linguistic calls semantic prosody, and it is connotation. Okay, so it's the same. It's the same idea. All right. Another way of looking at meaning in terms of lexical meaning is, well, ambiguity, right? Because often a word will have more than one meaning. Okay, so you have coat, as what I'm wearing now, but I can also put a coat of paint on something, and I can have a cat with a coat of fur, right, or a bear with a coat of fur. So these are three different meanings of the same word, right? If you look it up in a dictionary, probably will say code 1, code 2, code 3. Okay? Now, in this particular case, they actually are all connected, right? So what's the connection between the coat that I'm wearing, the coat of paint, and the coat of an animal?
It's a totally different meaning.
I'm sorry?
It's a totally different.
No. They're all the external layer. Coat is the external layer of clothing. The coat of paint is the coat that you put on top, right? And the coat of fur is the external layer of the body of the animal, right? So a coat is the external layer, right? So they're all connected, okay? Now, there are words that are completely unconnected, okay? Where it's a pure coincidence that, that the two words are sounds the same, okay? So my favorite joke when I introduce minimal pairs in phonetics is to have a picture of a pear as in the fruit, right? And of course, that's absolutely no connection between the two. Those are called homophones, okay? That's a homophone. Two words completely unconnected. They have completely different meaning, but they happen to sound the same. It's a coincidence, it happens, right? No big deal. Then you have homographs, which are spelled the same, but are pronounced differently. So the word R-E-A-D, read, can also be pronounced red, right? And there's a famous joke, was black and white and red all over, and it's a newspaper because it's red in the other sense, right? All right, so homonymy is basically they sound or are written the same, but the meaning is different, okay? Now, a lot of words are basically ambiguous, like coat, right? So how do you know that when I say I'm wearing a coat, I didn't just paint myself? Because of the context, right? That is, it's obvious that if I just painted myself, I'd be wearing something else than this, right? So you can tell from the context, right? And this is an interesting thing that people don't often quite realize, but most words are in fact ambiguous, okay? Or at least polysemic, meaning that they have more than one meaning, okay? So take the word get, okay? Early on in my career as a linguist, I became interested in the meaning of the word get, and so I actually looked them all up, okay? There's more than 40 different meanings to the word get, okay? So no wonder that then non-native speakers have a hard time. Okay, I mean, it's like seriously, right? I mean, what kind of language has 40 different meanings for get? Well, what does it mean? Well, because get is basically what people say has been, the meaning has been bleached out. It carries very little meaning left. Okay, so look at, did you get the joke? In this case, it means understand. Okay, if you say I got a bad grade, what does it mean? Receive, obtain, right? If you say you can get the bus to get here, what does it mean? Right, or take the bus, right? Okay, so basically what get does, it gives you a connection to the object, and then you need to figure out from the context and from the object what get means. Okay, so if I say, did you get the fried chicken? What do I mean? I'm sorry?
Receive?
Receive or buy, right? Or procure from the restaurant, right? I went to the restaurant. Did you get the fried chicken, right? You're checking that. If I say with a telescope you can see many stars, right? What I mean is stars in the sky, right? If I say in Hollywood, many stars go to the Oscar night, right? Okay, so it's obviously movie stars, right? But then you can have sentences like the one at the bottom of the slide in which the ambiguity isn't quite resolved, right? It says, in Hollywood you can see many stars. Well, is it the movie stars or is it the stars in the sky? It could be either one, right? So that's an example in which the disambiguation, well, basically didn't quite succeed. Okay, it didn't go all the way. Now, normally it does. Okay, that is, most of the time, by the time the person is done speaking, it's clear what you're talking about. Okay, it's extremely rare that there really is some ambiguity left. Okay, now, unlike what you would think from watching sitcoms and movie comedies, where often there is ambiguity. In real life, it's extremely rare. Okay, because most of the time it's clear what it is that you're talking about. Okay, and if it's not clear, what do people do? They say, what? What are you talking about? Right? They clarify. Okay, so again, it's extremely rare that you really don't understand each other, because if somehow the communication breaks down, then you ask for a clarification. Okay, so if I say, Shihun, will you bring me that? Shihun says, well, what's that? Right? We would say, what do you want? What do you need? Or would say this, right? So these are ways to disambiguate a sentence that's not clear enough. Okay? So again, the purpose of disambiguation is to make sure that people know what it is that you mean. Okay? Because most of language is ambiguous. And again, you don't think about it because we're very, very good at disambiguating. Okay? But in fact, we're disambiguating all the time. Okay? And as we said before, it happens mostly by context, because all sentences, all utterances are produced in a context. By the way, the difference between a sentence and an utterance is that an utterance is a sentence in context. Okay, so you can sort of write that down for later when we talk about pragmatics. Okay, now, as I said, context is very, very important to disambiguate, because it's going to tell you, if I say, I'm wearing this coat because it's cold today, then clearly I mean a coat as a jacket. Okay? If I say, I just put on the last coat, and I have a brush in my hand and I'm covered in paint, you say, oh, Sal's been painting the fence, right? Or something like that, right? So the context is going to tell you what you mean, right? However, context is also very important in understanding what the sentence itself means, okay? Why? Because as it turns out, there is more to the meaning of words than just the meaning of words, okay? And this is what we're going to talk about more in the, what was it, the fifth part of the lecture, okay? So for right now, we're just going to leave it to this example sort of as a teaser for the transition to the role of context in the lexicon. So look at these two sentences. John stacked the beer in the fridge. Right, that's a perfectly fine sentence of English, right? We understand it. There's no questions. It's very clear what John did, right? But then I said, John stacked the rainwater in the pool. Now, that is a weird sentence, right? So what do we have to imagine for that sentence not to be just absurd? I'm sorry?
That he was actually doing something with the water, putting it in?
Well, yes, but I mean, you can't stack water, except if it's in a container, right? So in other words, we have to imagine that John went, emptied the pool, and then had like bottles of water, for example, and then he stacked bottles of water in the pool. Now, why he would have done that, I've got absolutely no idea, okay? But that's what he would have had to do, okay? And then he had to fill the bottles with the rainwater, right? Because we know that in order for something to be stackable, it has to come in containers, right? Now, when you read beer for the first time, did you think, of course it comes in stackable containers? No, not for a second, okay? That is not part of the meaning of the word beer, okay? If I ask you, tell me what is the meaning of the word beer, you'll say it's a liquid, it has alcohol, it's golden colored, it is slightly bitter, you know, little foamy, people drink a lot of it, you know, it's fun. You are not going to say it comes in stackable containers. I mean, even if you said, and it comes in bottles or kegs or cans, you wouldn't say, and the bottles can be stacked. That just doesn't exist. And yet, you know from this pair of sentences that beer comes in stackable containers. Okay? That's the kind of information that goes beyond the meaning, the lexical meaning of the word, and is what we call encyclopedic knowledge. Okay? That is part of your knowledge is knowledge of the encyclopedia, of how things are in the world. Okay? So that, for example, beer comes in stackable containers. Now, can we imagine a society in which beer came in containers that couldn't be stacked? Yes, of course. Right? We could sell beer in, you know, soft plastic pouches. Right? Okay, transfusion blood. Does it come in cans, kegs, or bottles? No, it comes in bags that can be hung. You cannot stack them. I mean, I don't know, I'm not a nurse. If somebody's a nurse at home and says, no, you can actually stack them, okay, fine, I'm wrong. Okay? But my point is, we can imagine a society in which beer isn't stackable. Right? Because maybe we just ferment our own beer and you know, you just drink it directly, you know, so you have it there, right? You know, so my point is, it's just a feature of our society that beer comes in stackable containers, okay? Or that you would stack it in the fridge, right? think of it this way. Suppose that I say, I slaughtered a cow today. We're having steak for dinner. Right? We're in Texas. This perfectly fine sentence to use. Right? Is this a good sentence of English? Would you say, yeah, that makes perfect sense? Okay. I see that the neighbor slaughtered the cow. They're having steak for dinner. Right? Makes sense. What if I say, I see the neighbors slaughtered their horse. They're having steak for dinner. Sandy makes a face. Wampa doesn't make a face at all because he's thinking like, my God. Is that an okay sentence of English? But
The meaning is disgusting.
the meaning is disgusting. So it's not a good sentence of English, right? I mean, if I had said, I just, killed the cat, we're going to have cat stew for dinner, would you say that was okay? No, right? It's a peculiar sentence, right? Semantically, it's weird, okay? Except in France, they eat steak, they eat horse steak. I've had it myself, by the way. Okay? So in French culture, it's perfectly fine to eat horse steak, and that sentence makes perfect sense. In this culture, the cow makes sense, the horse not so much. Okay? So that's what I mean by, it's culture specific. All right. So this brings us to the end of the first half of this lecture, and now we're going to step into the second half, which is formal semantics.